and you are an intuitive life coach, which I'm interested to hear more about what that is, and also author of a book called Cold Showers. And so we can go over a little bit about that as well as a new book that's coming out January 21st. And that's also going to be in the same area of recovery, I believe. But we can talk a little bit about that as well. And then also, you're the founder of a group called Entrepreneurs in Recovery as well. So another thing I'm fascinated to hear about what that is, because as an entrepreneur, I really feel like a lot of the creative juices that I have are, really firmly rooted in what I've discovered about myself as going through the recovery process. So, a lot of the themes from the conversations that we're having at Rising Phoenix Wellness is really about recovery and sort of what people in recovery deal with, and then, what it makes possible on the other side of that. So, so thank you for being on the podcast, and I'm excited to learn more about your story and what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. It's going to be an exciting conversation. Let's do it.
Awesome. So the first thing I want to hear a little bit about, right? Because we've chatted briefly in the past, and I've sort of, I've dove into as much as I can get my hands on online. So I've seen that you do a lot of work for recovery groups in Georgia. So I've seen some of the work there, and it looks like you facilitate kind of group format type things for recovery. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, so one of the skills I've been trained in is the art of facilitation. And I learned the art of facilitation through a company called Exchange and the Exchange
Mm-hmm.
approach. And so, so I've been able to take that skill set to recovery community organizations. In fact, I've been using or working with Georgia through their Building Communities of Recovery grant. So the B Corp Building Communities of Recovery grant to help facilitate conversations throughout 2020. So we just got done 10 months of work together, and it was really profound. And I took them through, what's called the 5I cycle or the 5D cycle of appreciative inquiry alongside personal development and some other skills. So it's been really, really powerful experience working in Georgia with the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse.
Okay. And so is it just in Georgia as well, or you're sort of like, are you sort of working with different recovery communities all over the country?
Yeah, Georgia is the first one that was kind of working with a whole state. They cover the recovery community organizations. There's 34 of them covering the whole state of Georgia. So that was the first time where I worked with the whole state. Where in the past I might work with an addiction treatment center, or a sober living home, or a mental health center, or a drug court, or even a business. This was the first time it was multiple. It was like a system, not just one company. So, this is the first. But I've been doing this for about 3 years, and I started off doing this at local treatment centers, Avenues Recovery Center here in Concord, and doing it at local sober living homes down the street here, and just bringing it to the people, and then eventually getting paid for it, and starting to build what I was building with what I call Entrepreneurs in Recovery, which is essentially it's the ecosystem of facilitating conversations that matter in the mental health and addiction recovery world. And it has grown, but Georgia was the first really big opportunity with a big SAMHSA grant to move that work forward.
Awesome. Okay, I'm interested. I'm very interested in the Entrepreneurs in Recovery group that you run. But before, so I just want to take one step back and figure out, okay, you're doing a lot of that facilitation work in the groups, and obviously that work that you're doing with them comes from somewhere, right? So I'm interested to hear a little bit about who you were as a kid, growing up, who was Jesse as a young person?
Yeah, I mean, as a young person, life started out a little rocky. Alcoholism and drug addiction is rampant throughout my family. So my dad, when I was 4, he was addicted to cocaine and alcohol, and he left the scene and didn't
Wow.
return. So at 4, it was, pretty traumatizing. And hold on, this little inset is out of control. So it was, that was a traumatizing moment. So from there on, I became kind of a terror in some ways. I was lighting fires and stabbing couches with knives, and it was really just a result of repressed anger and trauma. So from there though, my mom was a single mom of 3 boys, and she did her
Hmm.
best to provide the best for us, and she did. We had amazing Christmases, and so I with all this pent up trauma and energy, I put it into playing sports like Pop Warner football and baseball, and um, and so that led to a pretty exciting childhood, and then eventually um, I got into some health problems. I had I had like a mini heart attack when I was 10 years old, and so
Wow.
I had to get on a heart monitor for 3 months. And was brought down to Children's Hospital in Boston and to monitor my heart, and that kind of changed things. When that happened, I ended up missing some sports um, opportunities, and I started to feel for the first time that I could die. It was like the first time where death was real,
Mm.
and so I started to get fearful, and I ended up quitting football. I ended up not doing football the next year. I would come back to it again, but I was just full of fear. And then, yeah, so the childhood was filled with many good memories, but it was also filled with, trauma and fear. And so that led to eventually what I call my first real addiction, which was internet pornography addiction and online gaming. So that started about 12, 13 years old. And then
Wow.
that's where the story begins.
Yeah. Okay. So it was there. So the sort of addictive tendency was there when you were younger as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first, I always say my first addiction was thumb sucking. I came out of the womb sucking my thumb, and I sucked my thumb all the way till I was 10, 11 years old. It was a coping
Wow.
mechanism for pain. It was a soothing, self-soothing exercise. And thumb sucking lasted many, many years, and until the pain of embarrassment caused me to quit. Enough people made fun of me for doing it, and I just stopped doing it. But so yeah, I found a coping mechanism for pain, and thumb sucking became that first, I guess, behavioral addiction. And from there, it went on to more serious addictions, but they really started with the behavioral addictions.
Yeah. So do you feel like, so you said you came out of the womb sucking your thumb. So are you aware of anything that was happening sort of in your immediate family or your mother's life that maybe caused some stress or angst for you as in the womb, and then you were sort of born into that in the world, or?
Unquestionably, unquestionably, this is the part of addiction and mental health and trauma that doesn't get talked about much, is the stress inside of the womb and what's going on in the household, and then coming out, and my father and my mother, obviously not getting along, and my father's drug addiction and losing his job at the post office. And so it was very traumatizing. I had a double hernia when I was 2 years old. Had to have surgery. A double hernia, I mean, that's pretty uncommon for a 2-year-old. So that's what a hernia is caused by, stress and different things. So even a diet. But so yeah, there was definitely that coming on. And today more than ever, I understand the relationship between nourishment and nutrition, and the lymphatic system, and how that works, and how disease shows up. And so yeah, I'm sure there was definitely connections between stress and trauma with what was happening in my body and what's happening in my environment, for sure.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. So as you were growing up, you said you started well with the thumb sucking. So there's probably present sort of all through, right? I'm sure if you look back. So you had the gaming and the internet porn stuff, and then when did things transition to? So did it transition into drugs and alcohol later, or how did that happen?
Yeah, so like when I was like probably 11, 12 years old, my friend we got a hold of a joint, and we smoked it, and that type of stuff. But it was really innocent. High school, I really didn't do much drinking and drugs. I dabbled here and there, but it was nothing serious. The drugs and alcohol really started when I attended my first semester of college.
Mm.
That's when really I started to recognize that I'm not like other people when I drink. I'm not like other people when I do drugs. And when people wanted to stop, I just was getting started. It's kind of was there. And so, yeah, so around 18, I would say it really started. And then it was a 4-year battle with addiction, that, so thank God, it was only 4 years, 18 to 22, but those
Hmm.
4 years were pretty dangerous and pretty deadly. So having found recovery at 22 was a godsend, and it wasn't by choice. It was by the law, but
Yeah.
I definitely am so grateful for all of it.
Yeah. Okay. So it was like legal trouble that sort of introduced you into the idea of kind of forced recovery. You went to like a treatment center or what?
No, I never went to a treatment center. What happened was I was arrested and charged with serious charges about ordering prescription pills through the internet, so painkillers and different types of substances. And I got caught,
Mm.
and it was a pretty serious offense because it was federal. And so I was faced with the reality. So at 22 years old, I moved to Florida. So at 21, a lot of times what we do when we're in addiction is we do the geographical cure. And so at 21, I had a very serious addiction to opioids and alcohol. And I decided to go to Florida to solve
Yeah.
my problems and heal my life. And I went down to Florida, and my addiction ramped up times 10. So, I came back, and at 22, those charges, it's kind of a backstory. I was arrested during that time, and they let me go. And so they came back 9 months later and said, "Hey, we're back." And they had built a discovery report against me, and I got arrested. And thank God, during the pretrial before my case, I was given a therapist, a drug and alcohol therapist, who ended up being
Wow.
an angel, who ended up being someone who changed my life very, very deeply. So I had her, and then I was introduced to the 12-step program. And from there, that's where the journey began of recovery. And I stayed in recovery because the judge was pretty clear. They didn't do any prison time. I took the charges, but I didn't do any prison time. And the judge was very clear. He's like, if I see you again, you'll do all your prison time. So that message hit me really hard. And my family was there, so it was kind of like, okay, this is serious. This guy means business. And I meant business about my recovery. And that was the journey. It started there. And now it's almost 15 years in December.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so funny when you said the geographical solution. That really hit home for me. I've never thought about that. I moved from high school from Maryland to South Carolina, lived there for a while, and then I moved from South Carolina to Ohio, and then from Ohio to New Zealand, and then New Zealand to Indonesia, and like I've literally been like all over the place. And I remember one time, um, I did like one of these personal development courses, and like was reconnecting with my mom, and she asked me one time, like, why do you keep running away? And it had never occurred to me like that before. But that question that she's asked me has always stuck with me. And it's just interesting when you said that. I never thought about that before, until now I can see for sure that's what I was doing, was like, burning bridges and then starting over again, and then going, and then sort of just relocating in my mess into different places,
Absolutely. Yeah.
thinking that was going to solve something.
It's our thinking, right? We think if we just move, it's going to change the inside, even though
Yeah.
it's an inside job the whole time. But we think by moving, it's going to change the inside. And maybe sometimes that does work for people, but most
Mm,
of the time we're running from that same inside trauma with the same inside addiction that we haven't dealt with. And it just, New Hampshire to Florida it was very hot in Florida. So we drank and we used. That's what happened.
yeah. Yeah. What do they say? Everywhere you go, there you are.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had this sort of the legal intervention, which kind of introduced you to this process, introduced you to an amazing person, right? So much of the time we meet the right person at the right time, they become like a mentor. So when did it go from something that was externally imposed to something that you like really chose for yourself, and became more of like a path for you?
I look at my recovery journey as two awakenings. The first awakening happened when I was arrested and I was brought into a therapist and a 12-step group, and all these different new habits I was starting to do, journaling and prayer and meditation and all these different things. So that was my first awakening. And not so much meditation, that really came later on, serious meditation, but definitely the first awakening was that like basic version of my recovery, which was huge. It was the foundation stone. That was like the first awakening happening for me at 22. And then the second awakening actually happened only a couple of years ago, where there was this like awakening to my inner truth, awakening to the deeper levels of trauma in my body. So that awakening happened later on, and that came with different practices, whether it was cold showers or daily meditation. Journaling, I take it very serious. I've been journaling every day for almost 15 years because my wise mentor in the beginning told me you should journal every day, and I took it serious. So I have 15 years of journals, and it's really cool to look back and see like, oh my God, like, because a lot of times we don't realize how far we've come. We don't realize the progress that we've made until we
Yeah.
read a journal from a year ago or 5 years ago. We go, wow, my thinking continues to evolve, and it brings a lot of gratitude. So that was the second awakening, was probably a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm. And can you identify one thing that like spawned that awakening, something that like that opened you up, or it was just an evolution, or what?
I think it was more of a evolution. In 2015, I found cold showers, right? I wrote a book about it. So in 2015, I found cold showers because a friend of mine, Nick Wright, said to me, he was someone in recovery as well. He said, hey, you should start taking cold showers. I think it's going to be really helpful for your anxiety. And he was right. And so that was kind of like the first step of like being 10 years in recovery, 10 years free from drugs and alcohol, but still having social anxiety at a level that was very deep and very traumatic, where I couldn't go food shopping sometimes because the panic would come on so much I wouldn't leave the house. And that was 10 years in recovery, and I was going for my master's in mental health counseling. So I was working on myself, I was studying the mind, and it didn't change it. And then when I started taking the cold showers in 2015, all of a sudden my confidence built into 2016, and I started getting out of my comfort zone and taking huge risks I never would have taken. And a year later, I left my job. I kept getting bigger with the risks, and so I think it was just, it was an evolution. And meditation also was started around 2013, 2014. So it was kind of like this gradual, building of an inner evolution. And then eventually I started to realize how to heal the deeper trauma. And when that started happening, that's when I really started to be able to look the world in the eye. I really had that experience happen. And so it's all beautiful. The first awakening involved 12 steps, and it involved all of that. And the second awakening involved the inner job, the inner world, the inner size,
Yeah. So, and when did you say the journaling started?
The journaling started the first month of my recovery. So at 22, so 2005, 2000.
Oh, wow. So all the way back at the beginning, you really had that practice and carried it with you.
Yeah, it's been one of the most healing practices I've had by far. I still do it every day today. It keeps evolving what that practice looks like, but it is something I do in the morning. It's something I do at night. Nighttime's a different process, but it's so huge. I can't emphasize it enough to be able to
Yeah.
write things down and then be able to look at it, look at last year's journal and just see like, wow. And you remember insights when you look back at a journal a year ago, you go, wow, I forgot about that idea. You bring it into this year, and you use that creativity to co-create even more opportunities. So it's really a powerful practice.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like so much of recovery is exactly what you're saying. It's interesting. You've used the word awakening a lot, right? Because I feel like part of what we're doing when we're sort of under the spell of drugs and alcohol is numbing our experience of life so that we don't have to deal with something, right? So we're sort of walking around on autopilot, just not dealing with what's going on. And I can see where becoming aware and becoming more and more aware, awakening up, is really such a huge part of the process. And I can see where journaling is something where you're actually taking your ideas out of your head and then putting them on paper so that you can work through them and look at them. I can see why that would be so healing. It's not something that I've spent a lot of time doing, although I love writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And another thing too, if you want to become a writer, if you want to start writing books, it's nice to have journals to look back at, because then you can, and also it's nice to validate truths, right? Like I can look back at my journal and have exact dates. I can not,
yeah,
in my book, I have exact dates because it was the exact date. You know, I journaled it. So it's really
yeah,
cool to look at that, and to when you're telling your story, if you're writing a book or maybe you're a blog writer or something, or you just write for fun, like it's great to have that to look back at and inspire yourself with those words. And yeah, it's just in every shape, you know, every form, every way you look at it, I don't see a downfall to it. So I think, you know, try it out. And you know, I certainly have a format that I use today that was different than when I started at 22. But I
yeah.
think if you just want a very simple way to journal, just write down, you know, at night, if you want to do the nighttime, just start with writing down 3 or 4 things you appreciate about yourself, about your day, about the world. And then from there, once you get the appreciation down, you can just simply write, hey, what were some of the highlights from my day? What were some of the highlights that I can write down? And just write down those highlights. And then at the end, that's it. Maybe you at the end, you write, you know, amen, or you write, you know, it is done, whatever you want to write. And that's it. And that's how I started journaling. Now, today it's different. Now I have like literally a template that I use. And that template is what works for me today, because I want to make sure I hit on different points to check in with myself. And so that's a format that works really well for me today, which is based on my new book. And the format that I teach in the book is the format that I do today, which is, you know, I'm sure we'll get into that, but
Mm. Yeah, that's amazing. I actually had a when I one time when things were not so good for me as well. I relapsed a couple of times. My wife had a guy in their family who's like a he's an kind of an Indian guru guy. My wife's from India originally, and he studied some like addiction therapy in New York, and then lives in India. And he didn't follow any sort of traditional, you know, addiction kind of protocol. But one of the things that he did have me do was two things. One, take a walk with my wife every day and hold hands and just share about what happened in the day. Like his main focus was really creating connection. And then he made me write every day about how do I feel about myself? How do I feel about others? And you know, what are and the things that I appreciated about the day. And
yeah,
that was like, you know, it wasn't the whole practice because he had other things that he taught, but that was the work that I was to do each day with myself.
that's amazing. I
Yeah.
love.
So I can really see, yeah, the value in that. Okay, so you're doing meditation, which is sort of working on the internal, and then tell me a little bit more about the cold shower. So for people that haven't done that before, they're not familiar with the term. That seems to be more of like um, the body side of things. So how did you get into that, and what did that make available for you?
Yeah, so I was never a cold anything. I didn't like the cold weather. Even though I live in New Hampshire, I didn't like the cold weather. I like the snow, love the snow, very peaceful, love that. But I didn't like being cold. You know, I grew up with Raynaud syndrome. You know, still have that today, and it's, you know, so cold. You know, cold is pain, right? It could be painful. So that's how I looked at cold. And someone came into my life who I met in recovery, and he's a guy who's very intuitive, and he just said to me, "Hey, you need to start taking cold showers for 30 days." And so in December of 2015, you know, I was challenged to a cold shower and I didn't want to do it. I actually said, no, it doesn't make any sense. I like my warm showers. Nope. And then my roommate at the time actually did it. He was like, I'll do it. And he literally turned the shower all the way cold in December in New Hampshire, and he jumped in. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I went to I went to the shower, turned it all the way cold, big mistake, jumped in, 5 minutes, came out, was red, but I felt energized, but I was like, cool. And then what happened was 2 hours later, I went to a meeting. And at that meeting, I'd always sit in that meeting and I would have this right in the solar plexus, right here. I'd have this like anxiety that would go to my solar plexus, to my hands and go to my ears. Like I could feel anxiety. I could feel it. It's a feeling, a physical feeling. It was the social anxiety that has always been there, and it wasn't there. And I was
Mm,
like, whoa, okay. What the only thing I did differently was I took that shower. So I said, I'm going to do it for 30 days. And that's That was the start. I did a 30-day challenge. I took straight cold showers for 30 days. I ended up quitting caffeine. I ended up making huge changes. I mean, I was drinking 2 Red Bulls every day. I had a case of Red Bull in my trunk for 7 years. So I had quit drugs, I had quit alcohol, quit smoking, all that stuff, but I was addicted to caffeine. And so within 6 months of cold showers every day, I quit caffeine. You know, that was an impossible addiction, because in recovery, that's an acceptable addiction. There's many
Yeah, for sure.
like this, well, many acceptable addictions. One is food and one is caffeine and some
Yeah.
other. So I just, you know, I quit caffeine. It was a miracle. So, and then I ended up winning the highest award my company has to offer at the time. And things just started getting bigger and big. And I said, wow. So it was a habit stack. You know, it was like I did the cold showers. It gave me confidence. I wasn't getting sick anymore. I haven't been sick in years. I'm like, okay, what is going on here? So it also helped me to look at my nutrition. Okay, what's really going into my body? Why does
Mm.
it matter? What's the electrical properties of food? Like all this stuff started to matter to me that never mattered before. And it was a spiral, you know, and I never did yoga before, and I started doing yoga. Like it was like this
Mm.
habit stacking. And it really, the catalyst, you know, it didn't start with cold showers because there was other habits I was doing, but cold showers was like this get out of my comfort zone. Hence why I called the book Smash Your Comfort Zone, right? I call the book Smash Your Comfort Zone with cold showers, because I looked at it as I was literally breaking through, I was smashing through layers of comfort in my mind that were just like, oh, take it easy on yourself and do this. And it's like, yes, absolutely do that. But also you gotta get past some of this internal fear that's lodged in the body, some of this
Yeah.
inside the body. And I think cold showers was a catalyst to start to go after this inner trauma, these deeper layers of stuckness. And yeah, so that was almost 5 years ago.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Yeah, it's interesting. So, because the body, you're right. I think you're right about that. The stuckness in terms of the whether it's trauma or just so much like this for so long. You know, it's like just letting that stuff go. It's
Survival,
interesting.
yeah, survival mode, right? You know, it's a
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I can totally see that. I remember when I first started doing the Wim Hof like breathing technique, it was like, wow, like afterwards really feeling, the release from that and then doing stretching and stuff afterwards is like a whole different energetic in the body.
absolutely.
So, yeah, it's interesting because I do drink a lot of coffee, and I wonder whether it's significantly counterproductive in terms of my energetic system. So when you were saying that, I'm like, interesting. I wonder if coffee has become a crutch for getting energy in the morning versus just being able to produce it through the body. And would a cold shower be something that gives you that kind of kickstart so that you don't have to rely on this habitual pattern of taking caffeine?
It's something to explore. It worked for me. It took 6 months. I weaned myself down. You know, it was 2 Red Bulls a day, then one more Red Bull a day, then a coffee, then a tea. And then I weaned myself off. I went to a trip in California and I said, this is it, I'm done. And I put it down and I had one day of detox. I had worried for, oh my God, 10 years of what the detox would be like, not drinking. One day of detox. And then the cold showers and the meditation practices and exercise and the whole package, right? It gave me this confidence that I didn't have to go back to. And I'll never drink it. Like I have, and it, you know, it's nothing wrong. Like if I said, oh, I'm going to have a cup of coffee, but like, I just don't need it. It's just like, I don't need a drink. Why would I have a drink right now? Why would I
Yeah,
snort a line of Coke? Like it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't align with my values now, where
yeah,
before it might have, you know, but now it just doesn't align. So I choose not to do that.
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. You've given me given me something to think about. So I love what you said about the idea of habit stacking. So you said it started with kind of an awareness that your body was an important. This is what I got, right. Your body is kind of an important part of the recovery process, and it sounds like you're sort of stacking different habits that all had to do with working with the body, whether it's nutrition or whatever. So is that concept come from somewhere, or how did you evolve through that process?
The concept of healing the body.
No,
or
the habit. You said habit stacking, where
I use the word, use the word habit stack because there is a book. I think it might be Stephen Guys, or I think who wrote the book. It's called Habit Stacking. There's a book called Mini Habits. You know,
Mm,
so those are great books to check out. Mini Habits, Habit Stacking. So I'm just using that terminology because I read a book that really explained what it is. But I was already doing it, but a book gave me the language, and so
okay.
the habit stacking came early on. Even at 22, I was doing habit stacking with journaling, reading, going to 12-step meetings, writing in a to-do list, because one habit would trigger another. So it would just, like even cold showers. Like I don't just jump in a cold shower like a madman, right? I have a process, right? I have a process of getting me prepared for that cold shower. So I might
Right.
do a motivating YouTube video or music, and I'll do some jumping jacks, or maybe I'll do a couple pull-ups or push-ups, and then I get ready, and then I go in. And so that's a habit stack. So a little bit of exercise. I might say an affirmation too. I like saying affirmations out loud. So I might
Yeah.
do that and jump in. So that the idea of habit stacking is just, we're already probably doing it. We just didn't have a language for it. So habit stacking is the most powerful way to start to write your first book. Right? It's like, oh, I can't write a book, and you come up with all the reasons. But the reality is just find 7 minutes. Can you find 7 minutes? So when you're doing something else, put in the habit of a 7-minute writing habit, and there your book is done. And so it's, there's always a way to add in things that just, oh, I don't have time. I don't have time for meditation. I don't have time for this. Well, first of all, you have time for a cold shower because you got to shower anyways. You do have,
Right.
you know what I mean? So there's these things that you can just automatically start to input. And people, by the way, you don't have to take a straight cold shower. That's not what I'm saying. You can literally just take a warm shower and go hot into cold, into hot, into cold. You could do that, the contrast shower. And some people are probably saying to themselves right now, like, oh, I already do that. So great. Then continue doing that. It's really your level of where you're at. For me, I needed the straight cold showers. I need to kick out some deep, deep levels of decades long anxiety. I needed to kick out some of
Yeah.
the caffeinated addiction, caffeine addiction. So I had to go a little bit of deeper levels of healing, just like we do for detoxing the body, we need to do some deeper levels. So guess what? We're going to have to stop eating foods if we're going to start to detox the body. So there's
Hmm.
steps to this detoxification process. And, cold showers was one of those ways to do it. It's still a practice today. I mean, I took a cold shower not too long ago. Why did I do that? Because it doesn't actually get me all wound up and crazy. It actually calms me down. It actually gives me like a higher vibration. If we want to talk about vibration, it gives me like a higher vibration. I feel more connected. I feel like the cold shower is almost a meditative practice. Like I get in there and I'm breathing very deeply, very slowly, and I'm just enjoying it. And sometimes, and honestly, I don't even have to change my breathing now. I'm so used to it. I'm so acclimated to it. I don't even have
Yeah.
to change my breathing. I'm just in it. I'm just like, oh, thank you. I'm grateful for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I know a lot of these practices where whether it's like Spartan running or meditation or yoga or these cold showers, you sort of encounter something that is intense like that, right? And then the goal is kind of to find the peace within the storm or within the chaos or whatever. And it provides an amazing opportunity to create presence, like that practice.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of people just don't know what to do to get started. I had a conversation with a gentleman from Louisiana, and he was recently hit by the storms that came through, and he lost his home. And so here's someone who has a girlfriend who has a kid, a mother. He has no recovery foundation. He's, lost. So he has not a lot to live for. The coronavirus is happening in his world. All these things are happening. His internet got knocked out with the storm, so there's no
Mm.
internet there. His cell phone doesn't work well. And somehow he found me, and somehow he messaged me on
Oh,
Facebook.
wow.
And I jumped on a call with him, and this guy doesn't even have, like, some would say, well, he can go to a meeting online. No, he can't. He doesn't have online internet. So it's
Yeah.
so what does someone do in that situation? What I said to him, I said, hey man, you've done some research in your past. You know about transcendental meditational stuff. That's all great, but not if you don't apply, it doesn't matter. So I said, how about try this? How about tomorrow when you wake up, take a cold shower? Okay, take a cold shower. Start there. Here's my book. Listen to my book. So I gave him a copy of my Audible book. I said, listen to my book. He listened to my book. He messaged me back. He's like, dude, I took the cold shower. I did my meditation. I did my journaling. I'm ready for the day. And it's like, we just need something. We need a catalyst. And this is
Yeah.
the year. 2020 is the year, right? Of all years, we really need to take it serious, because if not, mental health deterioration is happening at a rapid rate. So I think finding something that's going to get you ready to go for action. It doesn't have to be a cold shower, but find what it is for you. Some people, it's hot yoga. I don't know what's going to be for you. Find out
Yeah.
what it is that just kicks you into gear to start finding a purpose, starting finding a why to live. Because if not, the alternative is really being stuck. And that feeling of stuckness can be fatal for people who have acute addiction.
Yeah. 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 Just something that opens up the window to other things. Yeah, that's amazing. So, I want to go back to something that you said earlier. So you sort of were like given into this world where you probably were already holding a lot of stress and stuff in your body. You're born into a stressful situation. Like, were your parents, were you exposed to drug use, like, uh, in person when you were young as well?
Um, so from the ages of 1 to 6, I have no memory. I don't know
Mm.
why.
Okay.
But it was very stressful. So I know that things happen. We moved 6 times. So I don't remember seeing any drugs. So I don't even have really any memories. I have very
Mm.
faint memories. Um, you know, so, but when after that, when my mom left my dad, because my dad, after he left at 4, he was in a car accident that put him in a coma for 22 days. He had severe brain damage. So I never got to, so from age 4 to 20, we spoke a total of 3 times and he wasn't present. He passed away in 2003. And so we never had a relationship. So I never saw drugs or alcohol in that sense. And then my mom was really protective of me and my brothers. And so we just kind of made it happen. And so there was no drugs in the household and stuff. It was more like in my environment,
Mhm.
growing up in Lowell, Massachusetts, I saw some drugs happening, but yeah, it wasn't, really until college when it was kind of like, oh, I'm in the forest now. Where am I? And, I just started to really take on, drinking and drugging and doing.
Yeah. I just ask because in my experience, right, my parents are still together. Always, like, grew up surrounded by like incredibly loving environment, like really, what you would consider like a picture of like a perfect childhood, and I do have like these large sort of swaths of time that I have no recollection of. And I don't know if that's because I just wasn't present as a child, or whether something else happened. But you know I often wonder, and I want to ask you, like, what do you think is the root cause of a lot of the addiction and anxiety and stuff that people deal with? Because if I look at my life, I couldn't have asked for more in my own life, and yet I found myself, at really early age, like 14, 15 years old, drinking amounts of alcohol that most people, most people would blush at. And then it obviously developed from there. Um, but I wasn't, I didn't have anything to run away from. I was the prom king in high school. Like, I really didn't have anything to run from. And yet there I was. And then some people have, you know, um, different experiences when they're young. And I know Gabor Mate says that, addiction is caused primarily by trauma, right? Undealt with trauma in some sense. So what do you like? Because you've done a lot of work in this area, work with people that have dealt with this type of thing. So what do you think is sort of at the root cause of addiction? I know it's a big question, but it's like, wow, it's
Uh,
a big one.
so, I mean, there's many variables, and you could say, okay, genetics can play a role. But I don't know how much genetic plays a role anymore, because if you do the studies by Bruce Lipton and you look at epigenetics and you look at what is the actual percentage that genes cause disease, it's very low. So I think with this, even though there was a high chance that I could develop addiction, from my father and my grandmother, it was kind of in the family lineage. Besides that, though, you have to look at the world we're being born into nowadays. We're literally being born into a world that addiction's everywhere. It's the norm. It's a norm if you're on your phone 12 hours a day. It's the norm if you're eating fast foods. It's so like I look at it like we kind of are born into, and look at sexuality and the highly sexualized place that we're in. So pornography addiction, like it's almost like a badge of honor to be addicted. It's almost like addiction has become the norm, which I know Gabor Mate talks about. It's like we have a profoundly sick society, but it's normal. And so I think in a lot of ways we got to look at society as a whole and where we're really being born into this world of addiction. And
Yeah.
because people don't look at addiction as like, you know, my thinking or my fearful thoughts and emotions that keep me really stuck living the same year over and over for 40 years. They don't look at addiction like that, but it is. And, you know, so addiction is really, it's a really profound thing, but I think we're kind of groomed into addiction. And because when I look at my childhood, you know, we grew up in Lowell, but I was next to a forest, and I was in the forest I just love being in the forest by myself. My mom worked, single mom, so I had a lot of freedom kids do not have. And I get to just
Yeah.
run in the forest and catch turtles and do all these crazy things. But at the same time, every day I was eating Laffy Taffy, Now and Laters. I was drinking Coca-Cola. I was eating fast food. That was my whole childhood. So, and I was sick all the time. I was consuming massive amounts of dairy, massive amounts of coffee fraps and ice cream. And I was sick all the time. I had severe chronic asthma. I'd have a nebulizer machine constantly. And all of it relates to what I was putting in. So whether that was putting into here or putting into here, my mouth or my brain. And I think we're kind of set up in ways to find addiction. And nowadays, you know, it's even worse. And I think, you know, I think that the root of addiction, I think this society is the root of addiction. But I think definitely trauma plays a huge role in how acute addiction becomes. It can play a role in how acute addiction comes, because addiction is on a spectrum, right? So some people can have a drink, right, and just has to stay away from the harder drugs. And some people can't have a drink, and because when they have that one drink, they go right to an 8 ball of cocaine. So that was me. So
Yeah.
there's just this levels of addiction, but you know the root cause of it all. I think it comes back to our society, and trauma plays a big role, and even what we're eating. You know, I think food is not really looked at hard enough to see like we can really become addicted to numbing out with food, and then it's alcohol, and then it's, you know, then it's maybe you break your elbow and then you're at the hospital and you've never had addiction in your life, you know, quote unquote, never had addiction. And you go to the hospital, you broke your elbow, and they prescribe you Vicodin or oxycodone. And next thing you know, that prescription runs out and you go, well, I want more. And then you get more. And next thing you know, you can't get it unless you go to the street or you go online like I did. Don't do that. And then you end up what? Going to heroin for $5 a bag versus $80 for an Oxycontin. So it's,
Mhm.
it's really, you know, it doesn't take much. People think like, wow, look at your life. It makes sense. And all. It's like, you know, there's people who had your life, look at your life and end up in a place where they're shooting heroin and never
Yeah.
was. So things have changed. And, you know, but I think, you know, the good news is that we know things that we didn't know before. We know
Yeah.
more about trauma because of Peter Levine and Gabor Mate. We can really understand why does the trauma get stuck and why does it freeze in the body and what can we do about it? And there's ways to deal with it through somatic therapy or even food,
Yeah.
and certainly meditation and yoga and different practices. So the good news is there is a way out, and someone like you and someone like me and some of the guests you'll be interviewing, that's all we're going to talk about is how did we
Yeah.
get out of it? And I think that's really important. You can hear our
Yeah.
story and relate, but how did we get on the other side?
Yeah. Yeah. The solution is really holistic. I think that's so important. Are you familiar with Jonathan Hari? He wrote
Oh,
a book called Lost
absolutely.
Connections. Yeah,
Yeah.
when he talks about the rat park work, you know what I mean? Like when they put the rats in isolation and they gave them the cocaine water, I think, you know, they basically just drank themselves to death, and they sort of they use that as sort of a proof that it's the drugs is the problem, right? You get hooked on these chemical dependencies, and then they put the same rat in a like a playground for rats, like with other rats, where they have like, exercise equipment, and they can have, as Jonathan would say, loads of sex and loads of fun and loads of, like just other things to do. And then they had two water bottles with just one water and one with the water and the cocaine. And when the rats are engaged and they're in community and they have all of those other things going on, the water with the cocaine just stays there unused. And so, when he talks about that, I think that's so important to understand that it's not about the chemical hook of the drug, that the addiction is located somewhere in, the lost connections, or like you're saying, the culture that we live in, that where there's so much isolation and, lack of sharing and things like that. And that's why I really wanted to start having these conversations now, because we're in the middle of a pandemic where people are more isolated, more lonely, more like alone. Like you're saying, that poor guy, he wanted to get better, but he's got none of the resources that, many of us use to be able to find meditation and to find these different things, so you were able to help him use what's there, when he's there. But I think it's so important that we have these conversations and really give people some solutions, because I know that there's so many people that are out there that are dealing with depression, anxiety, addiction. Like you said, addiction is on a spectrum. I think that's so important to realize, is that people think of addicts sometimes as these people that are in the gutter with a paper bag and they're drawing out of one side of their mouth or something like that, when in reality, we all have some sort of coping mechanism to deal with, the uncomfortableness of our life. And those things that like you're saying, are so important, that people have access to those things. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's amazing. So I have a little bit of a sense of what you think sort of causes the problem, right? So what does recovery mean to you?
So recovery to mean is freedom. Recovery is freedom, because I didn't feel, for some reason, I feel like there was a lack of freedom, and certainly when I was in the bondage of drug and alcohol addiction, there was no freedom. It was like
Mm-hmm.
I was trapped and there was no getting out. There was no future. There was no like me at 80 in Florida on the beach. There wasn't that. It was like, if I live another day, then I'm lucky. Um, so I think the freedom that comes with like getting on the other side of that, like, okay, I found freedom from my addiction, and however you find it, you could find it with, maybe it's the 12 steps or yoga or forest bathing. I don't care. It's just, you found a way to get that first level of, that would be cool, right? Forest bathing recovery.
Yeah.
Um, so, so having that first step to find that first freedom, which is just to get removed from that addiction. It's still going to be right in your face. It's right there, but just have it removed far enough that it's not putting into your body or into your mind. And so that's kind of the first step. And then from there, it's like, who am I? What am I doing here? And we have that profound opportunity of, as people who have come onto the other side and have recovered, we now can ask these questions we never really could ask before, because we really did felt trapped. We felt
Yeah.
trapped. Now we can ask, like, who am I? What do I want to do? What's my why? What can I do to give back? And then that's like the next phase, which is, okay, well, what am I good at? What do I want to do? And you might not know right away. I didn't know at 22, but I
Yeah.
certainly, there was little hints of what was possible. And I knew really early on that it was in service of others. Like I knew it, and that, the communities, the self-help communities, 12-step groups, stuff like that, they show you that, like, okay, here's connection. Like Johan Hari talks about, the opposite of addiction is connection. Okay, well, here's
Yeah.
my connection. I have this recovery, but there's also other work to be done. And so that's really where recovery starts to flourish. So there is no one right way to answer it, but I love this idea of a collaborative recovery. This collaborative recovery where we share resources with each other of what worked for
Mm-hmm.
you, what worked for you, and what worked for you. And we can come together as a world, as one, and share, how did you get into recovery? How did you get into recovery? Oh, your recovery is a little different than mine. And really start to learn from each other's practices. And that's why I urge people to really get a journaling practice, to start to write your story down so that you can start to share that story, whether it's through a blog or your pastor, your rabbi, or your meeting or whatever. Start to share your story. And then eventually you start to realize you have a lot to offer, especially if you've been way down in the dumps. You've been homeless. Everything has happened to you. You're a felon, all this stuff. Perfect. That's the story we want to hear, because we want to hear how you overcame that, because you're more resilient as a result of going through the trauma, as a result of addiction. You are
Yeah.
super resilient. And now you can be a resilient warrior to use that to then inspire others. So recovery looks different for everyone. That's the beautiful thing of it. We need to become collaborative in our recovery so we can learn about all these solutions, because there's not one way. That's a
Yeah.
thinking that has been very deadly. And that's a thinking that we're, slowly, I think, especially COVID has shown us, because it has disrupted every type of recovery, is to see, like, what else is out there? What else can I
Yeah.
learn from and evolve?
Yeah. That's amazing. When you said before about the freedom, it reminded me of when I was really in the throes of the addiction as well. It's like I had a lot of anxiety, like you were saying as well, when I was in social settings. And like in that moment, it's like I could just only think about, how do I get out of the building? And then how do I get to my apartment? And then how do I, like, you know what I mean? It's like time was literally in like these like moment by moment increments, just dealing with just trying to survive every moment. And I see exactly what you mean in terms of that freedom now. As you release a lot of that stuff, it opens up for a future where you can live into something different. That's amazing. So a second ago, you said um, that it makes something else possible. So, and that the power is in the story, right? So now I get that your life is really given by service, right? Like telling your story and then allowing your story to be the thing that inspires others and helps them, right? So what do you feel like recovery has given you that allows you to then make a difference with other people?
Recovery has given me the opportunity to be around other people who became mentors and coaches and teachers. So because before recovery, even when I wasn't using drugs and alcohol, I didn't have teachers or mentors that I didn't care about.
Yeah,
It didn't matter. But when I became
that's a good point.
when I became when I got into recovery, all of a sudden I started listening to people. And all of a sudden, bam, I had a mentor right away. And then I had a teacher here. And then all of a sudden I started realizing, like, wow, I have a lot to learn from all these different perspectives. And I started to take that on. And that's been an ongoing thing, to become a lifelong learner. And I always want to stay the student, and I just keep learning from people. And as I do that, people might look at my life today and be like, oh, you have it so easy. Like, you can just navigate mental health and all this stuff. And it's like, well, actually, this year I had a not a nervous breakdown, but when COVID hit, I had just got back. I went to Costa Rica. Let me put it into perspective. I did a 40-day juice fast to start the year. I went to Costa Rica 2 weeks later to go to a farm of life, 4 hours in the jungle, to go even deeper into this. And then I went to a retreat in California, and I came back and COVID hit. And it was like the people around me started freaking out. Coaching clients, people I was sponsoring were freaking out. And I was like, what's going on? And I fell in this deep hole. Like you said, the vision became this. I fell in this deep hole of depression I haven't had in 15, 14 years.
Mm,
So with all the knowledge I have and all the practices, I fell into that.
yeah.
The good news is I could climb out of it because I knew what to do. I had the strategies to come out of that because I had tried these strategies and I knew how to come out of it. But what I'm saying is it can still happen to anyone. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so I don't even know what the original question was, but
Well, no, that's great. I mean, I think this idea of mentors is so amazing so it was sort of like, what did you get out of recovery? And
oh,
I got one of the things that I just got from what you were saying is like this idea that it happens in a community, right? Your recovery happens in connection and sharing with other people. And I think about, my wife is Indian, like they have this long history of gurus, and if you look at a lot of the East Asian cultures, they're all like, you have these samurais and these martial arts and these different things that always incorporated some idea of like a mentor, like somebody that you work with. And I think for sure that's really missing in the culture that we have. Rituals, community, mentors, this idea that kids have something to grow up into. I think that's a really important point I've never thought about before.
One of the things I talk about in my book is this idea of a recovery team, your recovery
Mm,
circle. And I can tell you that has saved my life, is having a recovery team. And what a recovery team is to me, you could call it simply your support team. So I
mm,
have 5 people that at any moment I could pick this cell phone up right now and I could
yeah,
text them, call them, and I'm going to get a response. So building a recovery team is very important. So you need to find people that you can actually know, that you can share. And it might not be your mom, and it might not be, it's going to be people that are not affected by what you're going to say. They're going to just listen to you. They're not going to give you advice, or they might if their intuition says that, but they're just going to listen to you. And having those 5 people, have I always had 5 people? Absolutely not. Today I have more than 5, but I have 5 main people that at any point I call my recovery team and I can reach out to, and they're going to help me. So that's what I can, if there's one message I can leave, is to build your recovery team. Start with 1, get to 2, get to 2, 3, and then to 5. And at any point I can reach out to these people, and it could be about any subject matter: relationship struggle, money struggle, entrepreneurship struggles. And I'm going to call them and they're going to get back to me. And that's really powerful. And I think
yeah,
that's something that I recommend for all, is having that. And again, getting back to this idea of a collaborative recovery that we can have in this we can have a flourishing world of collaborative recovery. It's powerful.
yeah. Yeah, I mean that's why on December 6th we're having the recovering me event, and the idea about that event is actually just that. Like, everybody has a different approach to recovery, and the truth is somewhere in the practice, right? People will resonate with different things, and it's so important that people find practices and solutions that resonate with them, and just help them, exactly what you said before. Like, one thing will lead you to here, meditation will lead you to this, and then that will lead you to here, and then it's a process of finding your own path. So I feel like I could talk to you forever. I still have like so many questions that I didn't get to ask you, but I want to end with giving you an opportunity to share a little bit about the Entrepreneurs in Recovery group, and then also the new book that you have coming out, right? So you are such a wealth of knowledge and creating this ecosystem for yourself. And I know that there will be people who want to connect with you and either work with you or learn from you like that. So can you share a little bit about the Entrepreneurs in Recovery group, and then also the book that you have coming out in January?
Yeah, so the Entrepreneurs in Recovery, that really is an idea of facilitation in the recovery community, and bringing leaders in, like, so addiction recovery leaders and mental health leaders, and helping them to co-create conversations, which they don't know how to do right now because they used to do them in person, and now they're like, what the hell do we do? So I can really help people to, how do you have successful, congruent, team coherent conversations online? So that's kind
Mm,
of the idea of the Entrepreneurs in Recovery facilitation side. Um, so the book, that book is right now, the working title, which can change tomorrow, is "If Not You, Then Who?" Just meaning, if it's not you, it's no one else. It's got to be you. You're the one that needs to bring the change in the world and be the change. So that book is going to come out on January 22nd, 2021. And that book is literally, it starts off with a heavy memoir, because I just put all the darkness of addiction in the beginning of it. And then
yeah.
the next 6 chapters is a solution. And it's my version of recovery. Everyone's going to be different, but I'm just going to share all the things I've learned in the last 14, 15 years of journaling and experimenting and failing and becoming an entrepreneur in recovery, what that was like. So that's all going to be in that book in January.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to that, and we'll put links in the show notes to the difference. So the Cold Showers book, or was it called Breaking Through Your
That's called Smash Your Comfort Zone with Cold
Smash Your
Showers.
Comfort Zone, and then also the Entrepreneurs in Recovery, and different places where people can find you? And can they pre-order the book, or how does that work?
Not yet. I've just got done the first draft, so I'm going to go through some editing revisions, and then anyone who wants to reach out to me, who wants to be part of the reader team or anything like that, go ahead and reach out, and happy to do that. So yeah, we're getting there. It's getting there.
Okay. Awesome, my friend. Well, thank you so much for being willing to take the time today you know, we've just sort of getting to know each other a little bit, but just in the short period, in the 2 conversations that we've had, I've really learned a lot from you in terms of your approach to recovery, and some of the areas and directions that I want to go in. So I appreciate your perspective and what you provide to people. It really makes a difference. You know, I know that the world right now, we're in such a strange time, and people are feeling disconnected and alone and scared and afraid, and like there is no freedom, you know. So it's people like you that have a message, not just a message, but practical tools that they can use to get unstuck, I think is such a valuable gift to the world. So thank you so much for providing that. And I look forward to collaborating again in the Recovering Me event that we will do on December 6th. And we'll leave the link to that in the show notes as well. But just thank you so much. And I honor you for what you do.
Thank you, Nathan.